Good evening. I'd like to call the June 7, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee?
Here.
Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Mr. Ertl? Okay, no, I saw Phil. Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here.
Recording in progress.
I'm in clear. Is Mr. Ertl here?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Okay, so everyone is present. Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes this evening. The first is the set from Monday, May 3rd, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Watching it? To put it on you.
I'm sorry. If you are, could you please, whoever you are, please mute your screen, your Zoom, please. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't even hear, I heard a second, but I didn't see who it was.
Mrs. Blankfeld.
Mrs. Blankfeld. Very good. Thank you. Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
I muted myself, Mrs. Blankfeld.
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Yeah, hi, Rebecca.
Mrs. Dansinger, please mute your phone, please. Mr. Rock? Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, just click on mute.
Larry Dansinger.
Yes.
Mr. Dansinger, you need to mute your phone. We're getting too much feedback. Everybody's to be on mute, please.
Leah Weinreich.
Did we lose the mayor?
No, I'm here. I'm just waiting for everybody to mute. So
Okay.
they do that.
Can you mute Dansinger, Kelly?
I've been trying and somehow I can't get him to mute.
Okay.
That's why I was asking him to do it.
Okay, Dansinger is now muted. Thank you. All right, I believe the Mrs. Thomas, everybody voted yay on the motion, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Then the minutes of May 3, 2021 are approved. We have a set of minutes from May 19, 2021. Is there a motion?
Gould will move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. Gould. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next item is comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Total time allowed 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance number 91-25. Is there anybody here who would care to address the city this evening?
Yes,
Please raise your hand and I will call on you and then ask you to state your name and address for the record. And you'll have up to 5 minutes. I see Mr. Wertheim raised his hand and I heard him first, so I'll start there. You may proceed.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Steve Wertheim. I live at 4355 Baintree Road, and I come to you today as a board member of Reaching Heights. Since a large portion of our property taxes go to public school funding, the contribution to school funding by the state of Ohio is critical for the Heights. Local author and former director of Reaching Heights, Susie Kaiser, wrote an article published in last Sunday's Plain Dealer on this topic, in which she said, on June 1, State Senator Matt Dolan and Ohio Senate President Matt Huffman unveiled their education funding proposal, giving the Ohio Senate just 9 days to vet the plan before voting on its version of the state budget. It is a stark contrast to the Fair School Funding Plan that underwent 3 years of review and revision before winning overwhelmingly bipartisan support as part of the House budget bill. It should be noted that 90% of Ohio students are in public schools. If allowed to become law, the Senate education budget will weaken our system of public education. It will underfund the public system and make equal access to high quality education impossible, while simultaneously increasing state spending on private, unaccountable, and unregulated education opportunities. This has been an intense year for all of us, but specifically our educators. Please join Reaching Heights in thanking them for their devotion to our children, for risking their health and safety, and providing extraordinary outreach to offer food, technology, educational materials, enrichment, and reassurances to our students, their parents, and coworkers throughout this pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your time.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wertheim. I see Wynn Weiser has her hand up. You may state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Winifred Weiser. I live at 2177 Jackson Boulevard. I'm very concerned about the agenda item, quote, adding questions to a survey. This is extremely problematic since the survey in question is the one to gauge the feeling of residents regarding backyard garbage pickup. The city contracted with Dr. Sutton at Ball and Wallace to design and administer an unbiased survey about the subject. Adding questions that can bias the survey can lead to challenging the results based on those additions. It will also end up wasting the money spent to develop a valid survey. University Heights has 3 primary amenities outside of our normal city services: pool, park, and backyard pickup. The pool and the park both were approved by the voters when bond levies were approved to bring them into existence. Backyard pickup, if it had a vote, was done so long ago, it's been forgotten. In many cases, newer residents may or may not want or use any, all, or some of them. The survey, if done in an unbiased manner, gives us a chance to find out where that amenity stands with our residents. It can quiet the shouting from either side of the issue. It can bring evidence to council when considering these choices. That is the better way, in my humble opinion, to begin a discussion about retaining or eliminating an amenity from our community. Over the past year, the mayor has dedicated a large amount of his time and energy to force a change on the community. It is a change he wants. Rather, the real question should be, is it a change that the majority of the community wants? I doubt if enough Fent residents actually know about the alternative plan of the mayor for the service. Yes, we do Facebook, Twitter, but even with those social sites, only a small fraction of the city is reached. This isn't something that should happen without a clear sense of what the residents want. This happened once before in the city's history when a previous mayor wanted to merge the fire department with Shakers. Once the residents as a whole became aware of the situation, they spoke up in force. I encourage council to defeat this resolution. Please retain the unbiased nature of the survey that you are paying for so we can begin to get a grasp on what the community as a whole really would like to do with this amenity. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Jeff has his hand up.
Mr.
Jeff.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Gould.
may I
do you-
briefly respond to Ms. Weiser as the chair of the committee?
Sure, you may go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to clarify that the agenda item, although there may be some procedural matters to address when it comes up on the agenda, is to accept the questions, not add questions. That is to accept the questions as designed with by Dr. Sutton with the input of council at the committee meeting. So it is not a separate resolution to add questions after the survey has been designed. The items that are part of the council packet this evening are the final survey designed by Dr. Sutton after final input from council at our last service committee meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. All right, I see Dr. Eckstein has his hand up. So Dr. Eckstein, you may have the floor for up to 5 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. You're muted, Dr. Eckstein.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I've lost your video feed, but my name is Dr. Jeffrey Eckstein. I live at 4321 University Parkway. Just following up on a motion or a question last month, this administration, this committee has made it clear that the commercialization of residents is not going to be allowed. And discussed last month was that Mr. McConaughey was going to issue a cease and desist order to the House of 4316. So the question is, was that order delivered, and how is that order going to be enforced? Mr. McConaughey.
Thank you, Dr. Eckstein.
Mayor, do you want me to address that briefly?
Sure, you're welcome to. Go ahead. Please go ahead, Mr. McConville.
I did issue a letter to the owner of 4316 University Parkway probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, shortly after the meeting in which we made the representation that we would. As for enforcement, I'm not going to speak publicly on that. We're waiting to see what happens, and we're going to weigh our legal options.
Okay, then the next question I have is, what are our legal options without being specific? What are the city's legal options without being specific?
I don't know how to answer that question without being specific. I mean, I guess for now, the city's position is that none of these circumstances either exist or should be evaluated in a vacuum. And so we're doing our due diligence to gather what evidence we can as to what's happening in that neighborhood. I know that people have shared pictures and anecdotes. We're going to take our time and do our due diligence.
All right, second question is, now you look at the house, the second question has to do with safety issues. Each day, cars in the morning and evening park on the street. This street is used by children. Children use their skateboards up and down the street. They use these motorized two scooters, whatever you call them. Buses in the morning pick up children. In the afternoon, they drop off children. Parents come down the street to drop off the children at the elementary school at the end of the street. I, as a practicing physician of 30 years, of which many of the years was that of an emergency physician, this is a safety issue. And I will tell you, sir, this is a tragedy waiting to happen. And I think the safety issue, in addition to the issues regarding the house need to be addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Eckstein. Is there anything else you'd care to add? Or did this conclude your remarks?
That concludes my remarks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there anybody else who care to address the city this evening? So we'll scroll through the windows here and make sure nobody actually has like a physical hand up in addition to an electronic one. I'm not seeing anybody.
Mrs. Bretsky has her hand up.
Oh, I do. I see her now. Yes, Ms. Bresky. If you would start by stating your name and address for the record.
Toby Bresky, 2485 Charney Road. I really just have a question. I've been here in the community for many decades, and I recall that there were very strict laws that we had to observe. For example, if we wanted to make any improvements to our house, the city had to approve it. We couldn't do an addition without the city coming out and examining everything. And I also recall that if our sidewalks weren't straight, we were cited for that. We were cited for many things. So my question is, have these rules changed? And because from what I see going in certain neighborhoods, it's very difficult to walk down some sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. Have these changed, these rules changed from decades ago? And if they have, could they be listed in when you put out a newsletter at some point, when you put out the magazine, so that people could know what the new rules and laws are?
Well, thank you, Ms. Bresky. The rules overall have not changed. Property owners are responsible for the sidewalks in front of their properties. Citations are issued from time to time. The city 2 years ago was divided into 5 sectors, and there is a sector a year that we then focus on for enforcement actions. Other enforcement is brought up from time to time based upon either severity of an issue or resident complaint or just observance by our housing inspectors. So if there is a particular issue that you wish to complain about, wish to bring to the attention of the housing department, you are welcome to do that. Additions to homes still require a permit, still require going through the city, still a process. There's still architectural review board of zoning appeals where necessary. Certainly their plans are to be filed with the building department and permits pulled. Nobody is to simply build an addition on a home without going through the city.
One additional question, if I might ask. There's a house on my street. I know that the resident died a number of years ago.
Yes.
House can't be on the market. It's an agency owns it. It's just been vacant for maybe 4 years or so. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this isn't good for the neighborhood and people want to live here. I don't know if the house is deteriorating inside or what's going on. So I just wondered, how you handle situations like that.
Yes, I'm going to introduce briefly our Housing and Community Development Director. He's fairly new to the city, Mr. Jeff Engelbrecht. Mr. Engelbrecht, I think you are aware of the property she's referring to. Is there anything you'd like to say at this point?
Hi, ma'am. So we are moving forward with, well, let me step back. The housing department is being very proactive and making sure that the properties in the city are up to code, and that if there are any violations, that they are addressed. I'd be happy to meet with you at the property or at your property, walk up and down your street and view any properties that you feel may be out of compliance. But we are focusing on vacant and abandoned properties. That's one of the focuses of our department as of right now.
And with respect to the property that Ms. Bresky brought up, I believe I know which property you're referring to. You did not, I don't have that address in front of me and you didn't mention it, but I know which property it is. We are aware that in 2017, the owner passed away and it was in probate. The heir did not follow through on the probate proceeding. still in the name of the deceased resident, and we are aware of the situation. We'll be taking steps to resolve that situation. That is a time-consuming process. As a matter of due process, one simply cannot take property out of somebody's name easily or quickly. But we are aware that that particular home needs some attention, that particular property needs some attention, and it is on our radar. And if it's another home, though, that you're talking about, well, then we would certainly be interested in knowing. Please feel free to reach out to Mr. Engelbrecht here at the city to discuss further the property, whichever property it does happen to be. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Very good. Well, then we will move on to reports and communications from the mayor. City Hall is now open by appointment. The building department counter is open, though we ask that only one person enter the building at a time. If you are not fully vaccinated, please wear a mask when on city premises. Summer is back, the pool is open, and the tennis courts are open. And with summer heat, we have to watch out for our dogs. Yesterday morning, I walked to Walter Stinson Community Park to get coffee. There was a small crowd around a parked car, and a dog was inside, in the cargo hatch behind the back seat. Though the windows were cracked, the dog was panting, and sticking my hand through the cracked window, it was significantly hotter inside the car than outside. Our friends at Odd Dog Coffee called the police. I went into the park and shouted to folks there, to anyone, if this happened to be their car. No one claimed it. I went back, and through the cracked window on the driver's side door, I was just able to reach the switch to unlock the car. The dog in the hatch was too large to pull out from over the back seat, but he had a leash on. So I was then able to open the hatch, secure the leash, and let the dog out. Mary Elizabeth from Odd Dog brought over a bowl of water, which the dog immediately began lapping up. He then generally stayed in the shade of the car. Please do not leave your dog in the car when it is hot out, even with the windows cracked. It gets very hot inside a car quickly, even with cracked windows. And for everyone else, please know that Senate Bill 215, passed in 2016, codified as Ohio Revised Code Section 959.133, provides immunity from civil liability for damages to a car for breaking in to rescue a child or an animal, provided the following steps are taken. So long as a person, one, determines the vehicle is locked or there is otherwise no reasonable method for the minor or animal to exit the vehicle. Two, has a good faith belief that forcible entry into the vehicle is necessary because the minor or the animal is in imminent danger or suffering injury or death if not immediately removed. And based on the circumstances known to the person at the time, the belief is a reasonable one. Three, makes a good faith effort to contact the local law enforcement agency, the fire department, or a 911 operator before forcibly entering the vehicle. And if contact is not possible before forcibly entering the vehicle, contacts law enforcement or an emergency responder as soon as possible after forcibly entering the vehicle. Four, makes a good faith effort to place a notice on the vehicle's windshield with the person's contact information, the reason the entry was made, the location of the minor or the animal, and the fact that the authorities have been notified. Five, remains with the minor or the animal in a safe location until law enforcement or emergency responders arrive. And six, uses no more force to enter the vehicle and remove the minor or the animal than is necessary under the circumstances. Yesterday, I stayed with the dog until the police arrived, and then they handled it from there. But I ask the community, please do not do this to your dog. And for everyone else, please do not hesitate to rescue a child or a pet locked in a car if you encounter this situation. Call the police first and then do what must be done and no more to protect the life of whomever is inside. So, turning to tonight's agenda. Among the items we're considering this evening are approvals of recommendations from the City Planning Commission. Two are projects of great import that will have a lasting impact on our community. Item B is the approval of the lot consolidation and new subdivision plat at South Taylor Place condominiums. With the booming housing market, University Heights' first new housing development since the 1970s comes at an excellent time. This is the work of our city administration and the City Beautiful CIC, working together with the CHUH School District and Kinez Construction. After tonight, the marketing, sale, and construction of these homes are soon at hand. Thank you to all involved. There is much success to go around for which so many get credit. Item D is the approval of the proposed Zinkronheim new synagogue building project. Our administration began meeting with the members of the congregation of Zinkronheim over their interest in constructing a new synagogue building in December 2019. Through pre-administrative review, we worked with the applicant to help them formulate a superior proposal. We urged a larger site and the applicant acquired more land. We urged a one-way entrance off Summerfield to keep traffic from backing up on that residential street, and that is in the proposal before us tonight. The applicant heeded the requests of our police and fire department and their observations regarding public safety in the site configuration. We worked together on open space, green space considerations, the building setbacks, and other details. Even where variances are required, we worked together on creating something that will be truly beautiful. The overall benefit to the community more than justifies the project. It is among the kinds of new development the city wishes to encourage. This one being one that builds community, builds upon a strong and vital congregation that has long outgrown its present accommodations. I'm happy to give the Zinkronheim proposal before us tonight my full support. Thank you. This concludes my report. We'll now turn to the agenda items. The first agenda item is item A, approval of a price quote from Starfish Computer for consulting assistance work with Ree and Associates regarding the city's RFP for IT in an amount not to exceed 50 hours or $7,750. Is Mr. Franahan or Adam, who do we have here from Starfish?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pat Hanrahan from Starfish Computers on the call.
Very good. Mr. Hanahan, if you may have the floor to explain your proposal.
Sure. So the proposal is to assist Ray & Associates with the first portion of the city's RFP project. So Ray & Associates has come to Starfish Computer in looking for assistance with the first portion of the RFP. They've sent us some documents, drawing requests, and more or less a full-on layout report of the city's network infrastructure. So we are more than happy to provide that assistance to them and more than happy to get them all the information that they need so they can complete their work. Our sincere hope is that the 50 hours or 7750 is the very, very high end of what our portion of assistance will take. We hope to be somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 60% of that total in general. But I know with the city's process of having to put an agenda item on the docket here and then have a discussion, we would like to, in best interest of the ability to move forward with the project and help Ray & Associates at their disposal, I guess if you will, overshoot what we believe to be our total required assistance by a little bit, with intent to only invoice the city for our portion of the work actually conducted. So our involvement will be limited to whatever Ray & Associates requests of us, and then anything under that amount of 50 hours or 7750 will not be billed to the city.
Okay. Yeah, just to fill in a gap here for the benefit of everyone here. Starfish has been providing emergency IT services to the city. We do have an arrangement for that, but this quote is not emergency services. This quote is for additional work that Ray & Associates, when they do this kind of consultation with a client, would be doing with the on-site IT staff at that particular client. We don't have on-site IT staff. We only have the emergency services of Starfish Computer, thus the need for this separate quote. So thank you, Mr. Hanahan. Does anybody have any questions or comment? And if not, is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Very good. We have a motion by Mrs. Weiss to approve the price quote of Starfish Computer for consulting assistance work with Rand Associates regarding the city's RFP in an amount not to exceed 50 hours for $7,750. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Erdl. Any discussion on the motion?
Mayor, I wanted to better understand, and I don't know if it's actually on the motion, so I apologize if I'm out of order. Is there any negotiation that can be done with Ray or to better understand their process? And reviewing some of the emails that I've seen, it appears that, this extra cost comes because, as you've highlighted, we don't have internal people to the city. And the emails that I read from Starfish almost suggest that, well, this really is part of the evaluation process, and Ray is asking us, Starfish, to just kind of do their work for us, for them. And so I'm wondering if there's any conversation or negotiation that's been had or can be had, maybe with the intervention of the technology committee, to try to get a better understanding of why this information is necessary, and if there's a different way forward without surveying this provider for this amount of money.
Well, I believe that conversation has been had. I asked the representatives of Ray and Starfish to get together and hammer out an arrangement because it was obvious that one had information that the other needed and the other couldn't proceed without that information, or if they did proceed without it, that it would probably be to the detriment of the overall project. So after those parties met, they came back advising that they had worked out what was needed as far as information back and forth, or information from Starfish to Ray in particular, and that this particular quote should more than suffice to cover that exchange of information. Mr. Hanahan, is there anything you'd care to add with respect to how I've characterized that, or if I've mischaracterized it or not told the full story here, or if there's something you'd care to add, please do at this time.
I think you were pretty much spot on. Ultimately, what they came to us and said is that when they do projects of this nature, they are, and I don't want to say under the assumption, that might be me rephrasing their words inappropriately, but for the sake of advancing this conversation, I'm going to say they're kind of under the assumption that they have an IT resource available to them that works for the entity that they're doing the project for, that they can utilize to gain information. And when they explained this to us, we explained our relationship with the city and how we are a contracted as needed for emergency services provider. Having said that, they asked that we be available to them for any information requests that they might have so that they can properly provide you with the assessment that you're looking for. Ultimately, what it came down to is the fact that they don't have a working knowledge of your current infrastructure, and that is what they're going to be utilizing us for, is to gain the baseline information so that they can properly provide you with the assessment that would give you a sound foundation for a plan moving forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hanahan. Mr. Gould, does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't sure what the back and forth with Ray was. I mean, frankly, I'm a little disappointed in Ray that, they knew who we had, and they knew that we were using emergency services when we, put out this bid. And so for them to then ask us to incur an expenditure for them to complete their work above and beyond, the outline that they provided us, it's a little concerning. So, but thank you for the explanation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
All right.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item B, approval of Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the lot split and consolidation of parcels for the South Taylor Place condominiums located on South Taylor Road. We would like to hear from the applicant. I believe Mr. David is here.
I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Michael David, B. Arcanez Construction, here to ask approval of the lot split and consolidation for the South Taylor Place townhome development. We presented our proposed lot split to planning last week. We've also met with Joe in the engineering department to go over some concerns that he may have, which I believe we've addressed or are in the process of addressing. I'm here for any questions you may have, but otherwise I would respectfully request that you move to approve. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. David. Mr. Cheney, anything you'd care to add?
Thank you, Mayor. We have reviewed the lots of split or lots of consolidation, and we recommend approval. We had a contingency during the planning commission, and that has been satisfied because we have received a letter from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District approving the project because they have an easement over the project. So, and we're confident that OBT, Ohio Bell Telephone Company, which doesn't exist anymore, that easement will go away. So we recommend approval of the project.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Is there any questions or discussion? Otherwise, is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to approve approval of Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the lot split and consolidation of parcels for the South Taylor Place condominiums located on South Taylor Road. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone at the city for all your help on this project. We are getting ready to submit for permits shortly and are very excited to keep moving with this. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. David. Next item is item C, approval of Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the consolidation of lots 722-12-019, which is 2355 Canterbury, with 722-12-020 and 722-12-080 into one lot. Is the applicant here?
I am.
Ms. Neeson, could you are welcome to proceed.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Penny Neisen. I'm the property owner at 2355 Canterbury Road. I'm respectfully asking for your approval to consolidate these three parcels. It's kind of a surprise for me when I purchased the property that they weren't already consolidated. At the tax website, it looks like they're consolidated, but on the legal description, they are not. So I had the survey pulled, had the drawings done, submitted them to the Planning Commission, who reviewed my request last week. I think they approved it. And so I'm just respectfully coming before you now to ask for your approval to consolidate these lots.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Neisen. Mr. Cheney, do you have anything you'd care to add here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This consolidation meets all city and county standards, and we are recommending approval.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions or comments about this matter? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor, this was a really beautiful property and actually was a home that needed some work when Ms. Neisen took it over. And it is just a joy to watch the work that she has put into it. If you drive by now, it looks, like some arborist has taken over and there are new beds that are going in and mulch that's being put in. And it's a success story to the work that your administration is doing, with the directors to get people into University Heights. Because I believe the story, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Neisen, is that she moved from down the street on Northcliffe from Cleveland Heights into University Heights. So score one for University Heights. And as her neighbor on Northcliffe, I'm just so excited to see the work that she's doing to the property. I think it will be a premier property in the city. So with that, Mayor, I'll move to approve agenda item B, the consolidation of lots 722-12019, 722-12010, and 722-12080.
Okay. I think the second was 722-12-020. Maybe I
Is
missed
there
it.
an error on the memorandum dated June 3rd, 2021?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Let's make sure we have this right. There's one, yes, there's the parcel, the memo. Yeah, the memorandum has 010, the agenda has 020. Let's make sure we have the right parcel. Because when I read the agenda item, I read it off the agenda as 020.
The correct parcel is 020 and 019 and 080.
Okay, good. Well, when I read the agenda item, I did read the correct parcel numbers. Then it's Mr. Tooney's memo that has a digit off. So
My memo
I
is
will amend my
yes.
Okay.
I will amend my motion to include the 722-12020. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, in lieu of the 010. All right, very good. Motion by Mr. Gould accordingly. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second. Oh,
Okay.
go ahead, Mr. Rock.
Yeah, I'll take the second then by Mr. Rock. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, I've also seen the property and it's nice. You're doing a lovely thing with it. Nothing further then. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Nyson.
Thank you for the feedback about the work I'm doing.
Of course.
Thank you for your approval.
You're welcome. Next then is item D, approval of Planning Commission's recommendations for the proposed Synchronheim new Synagogue project on South Green Road. Rami Berner is here to present. So, Mr. Berner, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mayor, if I could
Yes.
interject momentarily.
Yes, Mr. McCollum.
Just to orient council and any of our audience that on this particular matter, council is sitting in review of zoning decisions that are made by the Planning Commission under Chapter 1274 of our ordinances. Consequently, this particular agenda item is what's known as a quasi-judicial hearing under Ohio law. That means that we're going to follow a pretty specific procedure that I'll outline. It also means that anyone wishing to provide testimony in connection with this agenda item will be asked to swear or affirm an oath. The format this evening will be that the applicant will present their application, which includes requests for a special use permit, requests for demolition of homes, consolidation of lots, and variances. Following the applicant's presentation, any member of the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the agenda item can speak in favor. Those wishing to speak against the application will be given an opportunity to speak against it. We have asked the applicant and have had conversations with the applicant about only presenting a small number of folks in favor and reserving the right to rebut testimony in the event that there's anyone here opposed to the project in the interest of time. I will leave that decision to Mr. Berner. It is his due process right to present what evidence he would like, but we've asked to be mindful of council's time this evening, and we're hoping that the applicant will do that. At some point after the public has been able to present their testimony and the applicant has been able to rebut any testimony, the floor will be given over to council members to engage the applicant in any dialogue. And then as council deems fit, they can close the floor and conduct any motions that they deem appropriate this evening. It's
I'll get to her quickly.
For purposes of the record, and I know this is a little bit cumbersome, I would ask people to bear with me. I do want to point out that there are a few different legal standards that we are considering in connection with the application. There's a request for a special use permit. That request is reviewed under Codified Ordinance Chapter 1274.01D, and I'll quickly review that language. That section says a special use permit shall be issued on the recommendation of the Planning Commission, subject to any reasonable conditions the Planning Commission may impose, after the applicant demonstrates to the Planning Commission by clear and convincing evidence that the provisions of this chapter will be met, and that the special use will not impair surrounding property values or uses, vehicular parking and pedestrian or traffic conditions, lighting, glare at night, noise pollution to others, or other applicable criteria in the Planning and Zoning Code, and will not be otherwise contrary to the public health, safety, and welfare. Since council is sitting in review of Planning Commission's decision, the same legal standard is applicable. The demolition request that is being made is reviewed under 1242.14B. That provision allows for the issuance of a demolition permit if one of 4 separate criteria are met. Those criteria are as follows. Number 1, the structure or building to be demolished is accessory to a permitted principal use. Number 2, a building permit has been issued for a replacement building on the same parcel. Number 3, and this is really the most pertinent one, a development plan has been approved by Planning Commission and City Council for a replacement building on the same parcel. And number 4, the City Council determines that the structure or building is a safety hazard or public nuisance. As I explained to Planning Commission members, the approval of the site plan and the permission to demolish homes go hand in hand. If the site plan is approved, the applicant will have the right to demolish the homes by virtue of the site plan approval. And finally, we have several variances under 1274 that are being considered. All of those variances are area variances. Those area variances are analyzed under the Duncan versus Middlefield practical difficulties test that's developed in Ohio law. That test has several factors. I'll go through them briefly. Number 1, whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Number 2, whether the variance is substantial. Number 3, whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered. Number 4, whether the variance could adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. Number 5, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. Number 6, whether the property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through some method other than a variance. And number 7, whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done. I think council will notice that Mr. Berner addresses several of those factors as he goes through the variance, but I'm happy to review any particular aspect of that practical difficulties test in connection with any questions council may have as the hearing proceeds. I will ask folks to be on their best Zoom behavior during the presentation. I know we have a lot of people and this isn't an ideal format, but if we could make sure that we're all muted except for the person who has the floor at any given time, that will help all the council members to hear all the evidence and allow the hearing to proceed without a hitch. With that, Mr. Berner, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to make your presentation to council.
Thank you. Do I need to affirm first, or is that?
Oh, yes, thank you. Mr. Berner, do you affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I affirm. Thank you very much. Thank you, council, for your time and everything that you do for the city, and we really appreciate the opportunity to present this proposal. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see kind of that cover slide? So I just want to start with a little bit of background about our synagogue and what a synagogue really means to the Orthodox Jewish community in particular. So we're inextricably tied to our synagogue in terms of our location. Because we only walk to synagogue on Saturdays, we have to be within a realistic distance, a realistic walking distance for that synagogue. And you know what? I'm sorry. I think I have. I apologize. I think I have the wrong presentation open. One moment, please. Oh, never mind. Okay, sorry, I was just at the wrong spot in the presentation. Okay, let me reshare that. Okay, apologize for that. So, we're kind of inextricably tied to that location. And currently, our current location has been, we've been struggling with for years, trying to make it work with our congregation, which has grown. It's currently kind of on the fringes of University Heights on the northeast corner, located over here. And you know, we're limited in where we can build a new location. You know, our congregation is very much centered on the eastern side of University Heights, kind of east of South Belvoir. And per the code, there's a very limited area in which a house of worship or a house of assembly can be built. And you know, in order to make our situation work, you know, we've been a congregation for 45 years in University Heights. The last 15 years, we've been renting the auditorium of the Yavna High School just over, you know, Green Road in Beechwood across the street. And, you know, that the synagogue is really the heart of our community. It's something that we go to multiple times a day, and we pray there, we study there, and it's, you know, the community is a community it's not a new community. We're not introducing a new community. It's a community that exists within University Heights, but we've been missing our heart for all these years. So this proposal is really in an ideal spot, right at the center of the density of our community. So to walk through a little bit of the site plan, as Mayor Brennan said, we really worked hard to, you know, in pre-administrative reviews, really understand the priorities of the city and try to accommodate as many as we could, and try to really be sensitive to the neighbors and surrounding properties as well. So initially we had 5 properties, and then we really pushed to get a 6th property in order to increase that green space. The building is located on the corner of Green and Summerfield, matching the setback in the front setback. And then one of the variances is matching the side setback of the existing house rather than the required code setback. And both of those moves are really to move as far away from our neighbors as possible. And then we provided screening around our perimeter in order, again, to maintain that privacy. The lot area, again, we kind of pushed, or we really pushed from a budgetary standpoint to acquire that last property, to increase our square footage as much as we can of our lot, and our open space. Currently, and we'll talk a little bit more about parking, we really analyzed what our parking needs are and then opted to minimize that, or not minimize it, to meet those needs in order to maximize green space, because we understood that was really a priority of the city rather than maximizing parking. So there's a pretty small open space variance that we're requesting, but a large parking variance. But again, we'll go through the parking and kind of how we arrived at the number that we're showing. You can see that there's an entrance only off of Summerfield, and then an entrance and exit onto Green. That also allows for kind of a loop for emergency vehicles and access. Yeah, emergency vehicles and access. Last thing, again, just talking about the screening. So there's a side yard setback the rear yard setback is another variance we're requesting, which refers to the edge of the parking, the paving setback, I guess you might call it, to the property line on the west. And again, there currently is heavy screening on the northwest, but where there isn't on the kind of the southwest edge, we're proposing heavy screening, fencing, etc. And then lastly, I mentioned earlier the side yard setback. You could kind of just see underneath ghosted here. We're matching the existing house, again, in order to maximize those other aspects of the lot. And that's another variance. And actually, screening of parking is not one of the variances. We are going to comply with that code, so could ignore that one. So again, just getting into parking here quickly. So again, you enter off of Summerfield. The idea is as an enter only, as opposed to an enter and exit or an exit. You know, if there was exiting here, people could stack up on Summerfield trying to make a left turn onto Green. We didn't want that. We wanted to keep people off the street as much as possible. So we have an enter on off of Summerfield, and then an entrance and exit off of Timber Lane. Traffic, just to summarize what Michael Baker International, they did a traffic study, what they found. So the peak hours that we operate at and the peak hours of traffic on the adjacent streets, Green, Timber Lane, and Summerfield, don't overlap. But what they did is they took the peak quantity or peak volumes and overlap them, even though they don't actually overlap, just to get a absolute worst case scenario. And what you're seeing on here is the results of that. A very minimal increase. I think it was like 1 second or a partial second on Summerfield or Timber Lane due to the impact of the synagogue. And just to get into the parking count and how we arrived at that. So this is a survey we did of people that typically come during weekdays. Again, Saturdays we all walk without exception. But during the weekday, there's, people do drive. It's not the full congregation because during the weekday, we don't typically have children. They do prayers in school and women don't attend either. And also people based on their schedule and work schedules might go to a different synagogue for a more convenient prayer service. But of the people that do typically come, you can see we have 44 congregants. There are 10 that will walk based on the new location and proximity to their house. And then you can see that there is quite a staggering of different times in and out. And so the 39 spots that we are providing, we felt very comfortable that would meet our needs. And that's why we dedicated the rest to green space, requiring only a 5% variance there. And in addition to that, this is a mapping of all of our congregants. And you can see in the new location, it's about a 5-minute walk for 55% of our congregants, 7-minute walk for 39%, and 10-minute walk for 6%. So we really feel that the walking to synagogue will definitely increase as opposed to driving based on its location. In the current location, I guess I should say, over by, closer to Cedar. So almost everybody's like in a 7-minute walk. And so I think this will be a very, very big boon to a more walkable city. Looking at site photometrics, so there is, because of the fencing on the west facade, we have 0 trespass. And this is actually a little bit cut off on the top here, but there is 60 feet from the edge of the parking to the north side of the lot. And so again, there's complete fall off of the lighting and no trespass on the neighboring properties. Landscaping, there is a stormwater retention, a dry stormwater retention pond, dry pond, I guess it's kind of an oxymoron, at the north side of the lot. It's actually, let me just pull up it's at the end of the presentation. In the packet that you have is a more accurate representation of exactly the size of that retention pond. But the idea is there might be wildflower plantings over there, and then more lawns and more kind of manicured landscaping as they get closer to the building. Screening of the transformer, screening of the dumpster location, and again, heavy screening at our perimeter to avoid any to create privacy for our neighbors. Just walking through the floor plan very quickly. The first floor is north is oriented up here, just like the plans you were looking at. So this is the entrance off the parking lot. You come in and there is a large sanctuary, a small classroom, coat room, and then there's an entry on the south side coming off of Summerfield. On the second floor, on the right here, is a women's balcony and a study hall. And then in the basement is a social hall, which is intended for the congregants and for our use. And typically that use is on Saturdays after services, we have a reception. Elevations, we tried to really pick up on a residential feel, but also a feel that we felt appropriate for an institutional ecclesiastic building. So picking up on brick patterning, some warmer tones, bringing maybe some limestone tones in there. And then just looking at some renderings of what that looks like. And then a view from the parking lot and a view from the corner of Summerfield and Green. And lastly, I just want to go over, actually I'm going to jump back here for a second. I apologize. One thing I do want to also mention, there was 2 irregular lots on the 2 northern lots where the property lines went out to the road. And as part of this process, we are happy to replat and give that back to the city in order to straighten out that property line and clean it up. We also did we reached out to the community early in addition to our early pre-administrative reviews. And this is a petition of support that we circulated, really focusing in on the surrounding areas. This represents all the residences that signed the petition in support. And lastly, in order to kind of belt and suspenders the parking situation, we have 2 parking agreements, one with Young Israel of Greater Cleveland across the street, and one with Green Road Synagogue directly across the street for overflow parking in the event that there might be some event that we run out of parking. I guess with that, I just want to hand it off to actually Mr. McConville. I forgot from Thursday if I have some planned speakers. Do I do that now or do we do that?
Yes, we would do that now, and I can swear them in as you introduce them.
Sure. So I'm going to introduce Rabbi Harlap, the rabbi of our congregation.
Rabbi, do you affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Council, thank you very much for working on this. Please excuse me. I am actually in my car. I had a wedding that I was officiating at tonight. The need of the synagogue is obvious. I think you in the city know it better than any of us. There have been many different applicants, certainly over the recent past, that have been asking for a synagogue because, with more people in the city that are interested in prayer and of Jewish Orthodox belief, and they go to the synagogue every Sabbath and they need a place to pray. We have been in talks with the city for a while. I was not part of it, but Rami and some others on the building committee have been doing a great job, and they've been coming to you for advice and for some guidance as to how to go about this. And we've really been trying to do as good a job as possible. As Rami pointed out, you know how difficult it is being limited to specific streets, and really trying to buy multiple lots one after the other was something that took a significant amount of time. But thank God we've gotten to this point, and we look to you, and we hope that you will help us get there all the way, or get past this point, recognizing what the community needs. Again, I just want to express our appreciation to all of you, and specifically to Mayor Brennan, who has shown his desire to really accommodate all the different factions within University Heights. And we appreciate it. And we know that it's a very hard juggle to balance. There's a lot to juggle, but we appreciate that you try to help us so that you can be able to do it in a successful way. And we look forward to your approval so that we can make this beautiful house of worship, this beautiful synagogue, and hopefully accommodate many of the people that need the accommodations.
Thank you, Rabbi. Greg Roberts.
Here, good evening.
Mr. Roberts, do you affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Roberts. I want to first thank the City Council for bringing up the topic of the new Zichron Chaim Synagogue on tonight's agenda. In my humble opinion, the city has a solid track record of doing a wonderful job deliberating and deciding upon all types of projects within its domain. My family and I have lived in University Heights for over 2 years. My comments tonight actually are similar to the comments that I made last Thursday evening during the University Heights Planning Commission meeting, but I believe do bear repeating. I strongly believe the addition of the new synagogue building will play a big part of University Heights staying a young and vibrant community into the future. Not only will my family and I personally benefit from the new building, but I firmly believe that University Heights and the surrounding areas will greatly benefit from the new building as well. There are 4 points that I would like to highlight tonight that are focused around the exemplary steps that Zichron Chaim has taken to ensure that not only the building conforms to all the city's codes, laws, procedures, and processes, but also the neighborly outreach that Rami had mentioned before that has been undertaken. And those points are, number one, that Zichron Chaim has engaged the city very early on, namely with the engineer and the development director. Number two, the city has taken the costly steps of securing 6 homes to ensure sufficient parking and green space. Number three, different members of the synagogue have reached out to the neighbors bordering the proposed building and beyond. And number four, the proposed synagogue has been placed on a street, Green Road, that has existing houses of worship on it. So with that, I just want to I appreciate the City Council's time this evening for their consideration for this new building. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. With that, I think I conclude the presentation. Thank you very much for your consideration and this opportunity to present our new home at University Heights.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Berner. All right, and I know that you reserved the opportunity to call additional witnesses if necessary on rebuttal. Mr. McConville, I believe the next step now is to ask for comment from anyone who is outside the presentation.
Yes, you know, it may make sense, Mayor, to ask for anyone who's opposed to the project to speak. It might give us a better gauge of whether rebuttal is necessary, and we would, of course, allow folks to rebut. But for purposes of expediency, it may make sense to do that first.
Very good. Is there anybody here?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
Just to better understand the quasi-judicial nature of the proceeding, at what point does council have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant? Perhaps Mr. McConville did that, explain that in his opening. I just missed it. I'm sorry. I know that at some point we can close the floor, he said, but what is there appropriate time to ask questions?
What we have typically done, Mr. Gould, is we will solicit comment from the general public here for or against, and then when that is exhausted, we turn the floor over to council to engage the applicant.
Thank
you. I believe we may also, in between, if the applicant has any rebuttal that they do want to put on, that would usually precede.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, very good. All right, so at this time then I would ask if there's anybody here this evening who is in opposition to the project who wants to be heard. If you would raise your hand either electronically or on the screen. I see Ms. Sachs is raising her hand. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Has there been any contact with the Jewish Federation of Cleveland or the police force or whatever for security? Has that been factored in?
Sure. I don't know if it's a rebuttal, but I could just answer the question. Is that?
It's not a rebuttal. It's a question.
Yeah, Mr. Berger, to answer that, I have no difficulty recognizing you for that purpose here.
Okay, so we haven't gotten far enough into the project to really talk about some specific security details of the building itself. But as Rabbi Frank described at the last meeting, we do have the arrangements we currently have with the Federation for security at Yavna High School will likely be a similar arrangement at this building. I don't think there has been any specific talks for this project with them yet, but that's our intent, is to probably continue that similar arrangement.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Berner. Is there anybody here then who is here to speak in opposition to the project? I want to make sure that if there is someone, that they have the opportunity to be heard. I'm just clicking through the screens here to see if anybody's raising their hand physically. I'm not seeing anybody there. I'm also not seeing any hands electronically in the participant window. So it does not appear that there is anybody here this evening to speak in opposition to the project. That said, we will then move on.
Mayor, there is a hand up. Lisa Smith.
I see it now. Very good. Lisa Diane Smith. You may have the floor if you would start by stating your name and address for the record.
Okay, Lisa Smith. I'm one of the owners of property 4520 University Parkway. They need to be sworn in.
Oh, yes. That's Mr. McConville. Will you do that, please?
Yes. Ms. Smith, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Yes, my concern at this point is the people from the synagogue have been in contact with us, but it was such short notice as to showing us how the project was going to be placed and what may have come up with the issues of the way the placement is of the building and what they're calling green space. What they're calling green space really isn't green space near our home. It's really a dry retention pond. And at this point, I'm not opposed to the synagogue being in the neighborhood. I'm just opposed to the way that it was done. I'm opposed to not giving me enough opportunity to complete my research that I need as far as verifying what the value of my home would be prior to the retention pond being placed behind my house, of which only had 1 day notice from the prior meeting and 1 week notice till today. I have not been able to secure a realtor or an appraiser to do so. So at this time, I would have to oppose the project due to that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Is there anybody else here who wanted to speak in opposition to the project? Seeing none, we will then return to Mr. Berner. Did you want to offer any rebuttal in light of the comment that we did receive in opposition?
In the interest of expedience, I don't want to get into particulars, but I do want to say that we completely intend to make the project as amenable to our neighbors as possible. And if that, whatever that means in landscaping, that's our intent. And we would like to continue those conversations with the Smiths. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions of the applicant or discussion that you would wish to engage in at this time?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
The only questions that I had were based off of this survey, and frankly, thank you so much for doing a survey. I think it speaks volumes to the engagement that you've had with the community. The people that appear to be against, or at least not shown as supporting on the map that you've provided, seem to be those who are in closer proximity. So just a couple questions on the survey first before questions about what their non-inclusion means. Did you limit the survey to University Heights residents, meaning that you didn't cross over to the other side of South Green Road?
Correct. We limited it to University Heights residents, essentially on the block surrounding. I do want to clarify that the orange dots mean people supported. If it doesn't have a dot, it doesn't mean that they didn't support. And I'm happy to say that there were, the Smiths were not interested in signing it, and everyone else that we approached did sign it, or they were not available, and that's why they're not marked down.
So the other locations, for instance, across University Parkway, there appear to be 2 houses. And then to the south on Summerfield, there are an additional 2 houses that aren't marked. Have you heard from those residents and received any opposition?
No, we have not received any opposition from those residents. The 2 that are just directly southwest of the site on Summerfield were out of the country or out of town. And when they came back, it was so close to the meeting, it just wasn't practical to get this all together, but no opposition.
And while I appreciate your willingness to engage with Ms. Smith, can you speak a little bit more to her concerns about timeline? From what I recall, the project has been in the works for 14 years, and I'm hearing from her that she heard about the retention pond behind her home last week. Can you talk about how the plans have come together that included the retention pond, and if there were attempts to reach out prior to last week, or what occurred that I'm hearing, that she's communicating that it was only since last week that she knew about this, because it seems to be a project long time in the making, and that seems like really short notice given the leeway you've had.
Sure. So the project has only been in this location in development for maybe 6 months before COVID. So, a year and a half, not 14 years. Maybe I'll ask Greg Roberts to speak, but we have been in contact with Mrs. Smith's mother, who lives at the house, and we contacted her over a year ago. And Greg, if you can.
Yeah, so what I can recall, from the timeline, soon after COVID, began, if you will, I think it was back late March of 2020, early April, we had a number of attempts to contact Mrs. Smith. I ended up actually writing her a letter, which I believe she still has in her possession, just explaining to her, who I am. I'm representing Zichron Chaim as part of the building committee. What we were looking to do. She had called me, and we had, 1 or 2 conversations, after that. So that was, a little over a year ago. I reached out to her a couple of weeks, letting her know that, we were going to, going in front of the council and then the building commission. And then we, finally were able to, Rami and I both were able to get with her last week. So we were, like I said, we did, sure that she knew again over a year ago in terms of the project itself.
And obviously, a year ago, we didn't have the retention, the stormwater management figured out. And the week and a half before Planning Commission, we were, trying to meet with her. And when it worked out, like Greg said, was the Wednesday before. We showed her the plans, and again, we stressed at that meeting, and we really want to be good neighbors. Whatever screening or landscaping is desirable to them within reason, we are happy to do and want to do that. So, we feel that we were proactive in reaching out, and we want to continue to be proactive in providing that privacy. And that's, I think, I don't know what else we could do.
And can I ask Mrs. Smith a question? Are you still?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Mrs. Smith, thanks so much for being willing to answer the question.
Yes,
okay.
I'm Mrs. Smith. I'm Mrs. Smith. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just, looking at the project and the package that we have before us, the applicants have been so accommodating in many ways, and I recognize how difficult it's been with the lack of prior notice as to the details and the planning with what you want to do. But it sounds like they're really willing to work with you. Are you, given how cooperative they've been in the past, are you comfortable with proceeding, tonight with the promises that you've heard from them?
Well, like I said, my opposition is not for them not to assemble. Okay. My opposition is that I have not had enough time to assess the value of the properties. You know, even though it appears that because I'm right next to the synagogue, my value probably would be higher because in the wintertime, somebody's not going to want to walk as far if I was to sit. But in reality, living behind a retention pond, whether it be a wet or a dry retention pond, it is unattractive, no matter how you dress it up. And that's my opposition to it at this time. I have not had an opportunity to complete my research on what my value of the home would be if it is a dry retention pond behind my house. I mean, as far as the safety was concerned, we've already gone over the safety, which I mentioned in the last meeting, and they mentioned again this meeting. They plan to continue with the same security that they've been using while they're across the street. They intend, if we ask, to place, the proper trees and foliage around it to make it more attractive. But yet, that still doesn't change the fact that my house could be devalued by having a dry retention pond behind it, and I have not had the opportunity to research that. Considering, yes, they let us know that they intended to buy the homes and everything about a year ago. Yes, they did attempt to contact us. They told us several times that they were coming and they didn't show up. And then all of a sudden, last week, you show up the day before the first meeting about it with the plans, saying, here's the plans. And that's the first I'm hearing about it. And then even with the plans, they're telling me, oh, this is green space. No, that's not really green space, because green space is when you decide that you're going to make something green space. That's a retention pond. That's a requirement for you to build on the property. So no, that's not green space. So that's my issue.
I just want to interject here. We don't typically engage the residents in a back and forth. They're not presenting an application. It's really the applicant's application, and typically the council would engage the applicant directly to address any concerns that might have been raised during the public comment portion of the proceedings. I'm a little reluctant to let this go on too much further because I don't want to get far afield of the issues. Ms. Smith has, articulated various concerns, and I think it would be appropriate to direct questions about those concerns to the applicant.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Mr. Gould, did you have any further questions of the applicant with regard to the matters brought up by Ms. Smith?
No, Mayor, my questions were for Ms. Smith.
Okay. All right. Very good.
I think it may be helpful. There was a lot of conversation, Mr. Berner, at the Planning Commission meeting about what that stormwater feature is. It's called a pond, but if you could perhaps go through some of the testimony.
Mr. McConville, just to clarify, my questions weren't about those details. My questions were for Mrs. Smith and regarding the timeline and how long she needed, but being disallowed from asking those, my concerns weren't about what it was or how it was designed, because that's not what Mrs. Smith just said. She said her issues were with timeline and how long she's had to process that. And it really, for my decision making, is beside the point of how the dry retention pond works. My question are about timing, and I'm sorry, I don't think the applicant has the information available to tell me how long Mrs. Smith needs to determine, answer the questions for her property. This is a huge, change. I think her property will go up in value. I think that she'll be very satisfied with what happens, and I think the applicants will be completely cooperative, in that process. But for me, when there's such a huge change in property and the makeup of the neighborhood, even if it's one resident, if we're talking about a reasonable period to consider, what's happening, my questions were for Mrs. Smith. And so I just wanted to clarify that I did not have other questions for the applicant, and I don't have questions. Your decision making may be that you wanted to hear about what the retention pond was, but that wasn't what I wanted to hear about.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Does anybody else on council have any questions or commentary, anything that will help move forward deliberation on this matter? Oh. Okay. Mr. McConville, when it comes to the items that are up for agenda item D, we do have 9 subparts, and at the Planning Commission proceedings, we did go and pass 9 or more different, motions. All of these were subject to the condition of the city entering into a development agreement and so on. As far as our approach this evening, is there a preference or a better practice with respect to should we go through and do each item separately, or is it acceptable, given the detail that the Planning Commission already went through, for council to simply accept them wholesale should they choose?
Well, Planning Commission did establish a detailed record about each separate item. I think it's 1 through 9 under agenda item D. There are different legal standards that apply to a few of those different matters. However, a record has been established that applied the legal standard in each case with respect to Planning Commission's decision. So I think if council wanted to make a record that established that they themselves didn't want to go through them one by one, but rather preferred to accept the recommendations of the Planning Commission wholesale, they could do that. But there would need to be a discussion on the record about each member agreeing that they didn't want to consider any particular issue separately. I think that the trap that we can fall into is assuming people are going to vote one way or another, and that it necessarily dictates how they're going to vote on each item. So I leave it to council. I'm comfortable as long as a record is established that council members don't need or want to consider each item one by one with a wholesale motion. But otherwise, if that's not the case, or if a record isn't established, we should go through them one by one.
Mayor, I'll just mention being on the Planning Commission as well, and hearing all the testimony and entire case before us at that meeting. I feel pretty comfortable doing what Mr. McConville suggests, where we get a record of that. We do not need a one by one. I don't need that. I approved this project as a whole in the Planning Commission with all the variances that went with it. But if there is someone on council who feels that one of the variances is out of line and should not be considered as part of the project as a whole, then we should hear that. But I feel comfortable moving forward, as Mr. McConville addressed.
Mr. McConville, I was also at that meeting, and it was, like 2.5 hours long. I have a very clear understanding of what each of those consisted of. So I'm comfortable, but I want to make sure that my colleagues are, if they had not attended that. There was a lot of discussion, and each of those, pieces, parts are important. So I'll leave it up to them and to you, but I think, my opinion, I think it's important that they each be considered separately, but that's just my opinion. I'll defer.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock, and thank you, Mrs. Blingfield. Yeah, I would join in with what Mr. Rock said. we did go through extensively at the Planning Commission level. Like Mr. Rock, I voted in favor of each and every one of these separate motions. So I myself, I'm not a voting member of the City Council, obviously, but unless there is a particular portion here that gives somebody pause where they want to be heard, we do not want to not have you heard, and we do not want you to feel as if you cannot support the project in total if you were not heard on a part or series of parts that you feel needs to be discussed further, or that you feel that you need to be heard on, and so on. So if there is any among the 9 subparts that gives any member of council pause, or you'd like to discuss further, seek clarification and so on, I would encourage that we do that now.
Mayor, I also attended that meeting, and I'm okay if we make a motion all at once.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Morris.
I think the portion that gives me pause is about timing and specifically the retention pond issue behind Mrs. Smith's home. I think with the, one of the things that was discussed earlier on is the different factions in University Heights and how well the administration has worked, to bring together each of those people. And I'm looking at this map here, and Mrs. Smith's house is directly next to the red zone project, where we're the spots that I see on the map. She's at the corner of University Parkway and South Green. And I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a resident who's going to have a massive change to their neighborhood. And if this was something where there was an emergent need to proceed, without, giving time for a resident to consider and be able to provide feedback, I would support that. But it doesn't seem like there's an emergent need. And so, if there's a portion that specifically deals with the retention pond, I think that the project is fantastic. It would have my support, but I just feel like we should give Ms. Smith additional time to, consider what's happening in her neighborhood and behind her house.
Thank you, Mr. Gould.
Well, I don't, I mean, from the sounds of it, I think there may be some reservation there, and I'm reluctant to recommend a wholesale motion if there's even one issue that, a member of council wants to have further discussion on. And that's, so. Can items be tabled as in large numbers, Luke, or does the motion have to be for an individual item one by one? I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Yeah, sure. Can a motion to table be taken on, does it have to be one by one as it's listed now? Or could that be done for an entire section of the agenda?
I suppose the same analysis would apply if everyone's comfortable with the tabling of the entire item, that could be undertaken.
I do not at all want to disregard Mrs. Smith's questions on the project. It seems that she, has been aware of the project for over a year. And I think a sit down with her and the members of that congregation's board and the city together will be able to resolve this. They have said, a few times in this meeting that they want to work with her. The city, I'm sure with the engineer, can come up with a solution, that all the parties can agree to. I do not at all think that this is appropriate to table this, especially when Planning Commission has approved it.
Mr. McConville, what options does council have after this is approved, say there's not a resolution, the property value goes down, there's going to be a mosquito issue, there's going to be a stench from the water that's in here, I don't know, whatever it is, and that there's not a resolution that can be had. Does this come back to us again? Is this one of those that comes back to us, or is this the final approval?
This is the final approval. Yeah, this is the final approval. I mean,
Thank you.
you'll notice that the second item, item number 2, contains a couple of conditions of the approval that Planning Commission applied to each and every one of the variances, as well as the approval for special use permit demolition consolidation. And those contingencies were, number 1, that each of the requirements that were set forth in a letter that Mr. Chuney generated on June 3rd, 2021 that relate to the site plan and that are not yet finalized be addressed. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Chuney in a moment to allow him to address a few of those items so that the nature of that condition is clear to council. The contingency that the developer enter into a development agreement with the city in connection with the project. So the development agreement, of course, is a document that we negotiate with the developers. They can vary slightly. They're fairly uniform project to project, but there are slight differentiations. If there's a particular issue here that council members wanted to work with Ms. Smith on incorporation into the development agreement, that is something certainly that we could do and work with the applicant on. I will say that in my conversations with Mr. Berner, he's indicated, this is not a surprise to him, I'm sure. He's indicated his understanding that a development agreement will be presented to him, and they've indicated an intent to work with the city, on fleshing out the issues in that agreement. So while the approval is final, the development agreement is something that is a condition, and that's a document that would be exchanged and negotiated.
Might I request that if Mr. Gold, Councilman Gold has some reservations, that we vote on each of the 9 points one by one to continue the meeting?
Yes.
I agree, because at this point we could have just voted on them. So let's just vote on them individually.
Mr. Chuney, did you want to enlighten council on those factors briefly, or if you recall them from your June 3rd letter?
No, I don't think I need, I mean, my letter speaks for itself. I am for the variances. I recommended for that. I did have a site plan approval letter. They have several items on their site plan that need to be resolved because they didn't have final plans yet. They're 75%, I would say, and those need to be addressed before we would recommend a permit for them to start construction. But I don't think it factors in on any of the voting tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Is there a motion?
So are we having a motion on the first point? How are we good for D number 1?
If someone wants to make that motion.
I would suggest that you proceed in that manner.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve D number 1.
Before we proceed with your motion, Mrs. Weiss, Mr. McConville, at the Planning Commission level, before we went through items 1 through 9, we also had a motion that agreed that all the items were subject to a development agreement. Should we make that blanket motion first?
Well, that's encompassed in item number 2.
Is it?
Yeah, so I think if we go through the language one by one, that would be helpful. So the initial motion is a motion to approve the special use permit for House of Assembly in accordance with 1274-01.
Okay, yes, in light of what you pointed out with number 2, that is, yes, I think that will suffice as well. All right, well, Mrs. Weiss has made the motion to approve item 1, to approve the recommended, the recommendation to approve the request for the special use permit to allow a house of assembly for the permitted use of a house of worship in accordance with section 1274.01A1. That motion is by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Also move.
Okay, second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Nay.
Okay, very good. Motion carries.
If council would like, I can help frame the motions.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. McConville.
Considering item D2, is there a motion to condition any and all other approvals given this evening relating to demolition, consolidation of the lots, variances, and site plan approval upon number one, compliance with the requirements set forth in Mr. Chuney's letter of June 3rd, 2021 to the applicant, and number two, the entry by the applicant into a development agreement with the city?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Nay.
Very good.
Moving to item D3 of the agenda, is there a motion to approve the demolition of the homes located at 14499 Summerfield, 2392, 2402, 2414, 2420, and 2424 South Green Road?
Moved.
Motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Nay.
Number 4, Mr. McConville.
Item D4, is there a motion to approve the consolidation of the lots at 14499 Summerfield and 2392, 2402, 2414, 2420, and 2424 South Green Road?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Nay.
Okay, number 5, Mr. Conville. Looks like we have 2 4s.
Yes. If you could bear with me for one moment. Is there a motion to approve a variance of 1.699 acres for the minimum lot area requirement set forth in 1274.02A1, where, as presented here, the proposed plan calls for 1.301 acres and the lot and the acreage requirement is 3 acres?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Second, Mayor.
Second by Mrs. Pardee. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
No.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Nay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Next item, Mr. McConville.
Is there a motion for a variance to the rear yard parking driving setback requirement of 18 feet, whereas here the proposed setback is 12 feet at certain portions and 15 feet at others of the rear yard, and the setback is 30 foot?
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Also move, I'll second, excuse me.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Nay.
Very good. Mr. McConville, next item.
Is there a motion to approve a variance of 5% from the required open space minimum requirement of 50% as set forth in 1274.03B, whereas here the plan calls for 45% of open space and the requirement is 50%?
Is there a motion?
Also move.
Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Nay.
Okay, very good. Item 7, Mr. McConville.
Is there a motion for a variance from the parking facilities requirements set forth in 1274.04 of 222 parking spaces, where the code requires 261 parking spaces and the proposed site plan offers 39 parking spaces, conditioned upon we don't need that condition, actually. They presented signed agreements. So let me repeat that. Is there a motion for a variance from the parking requirements of 1274.04 for a variance of 222 parking spaces, where the required number is 261 and the spaces proposed are 39?
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
No.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Nay.
Okay, very good. Next item is number 8, Mr. McConville.
Is there a motion to grant a variance for a side yard setback to comply with the requirements of 1274.02B2 to cause the building to line up with the existing structure at 2424 South Green Road?
Is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pardee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Nay.
Okay, which brings us to number 9, Mr. McConville.
Before we proceed with a motion on this, the request of the applicant is for site plan approval. Planning Commission had debate about and elected to grant the site plan approval without the proposed 4-foot aluminum fence around the stormwater retention area. I'm just wanting direction on what council wants this motion to be, fence or no fence.
If I may, I would recommend that we remain true to the Planning Commission's recommendation of no fence. And there was also discussion that should for safety reasons it were appropriate to have a fence nevertheless, that administratively that would be accomplished, and that was a small enough alteration from the site plan that it wouldn't require returning to Planning Commission. That was the legal opinion of the law director at the meeting. I believe I've stated that, your opinion correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. And so I'll ask if there's a motion to approve the site plan with one change, that there not be a requirement for a 4-foot aluminum fence around the stormwater retention area.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Move.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Nay.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. I believe that exhausts all the subparts of this agenda item. Mr. McConville, we've not left anything out that I can see.
That's correct.
Very good. Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Rami and Mr. Berner and the applicants overall for their application, and delighted that we are at the point that we are here. There's still a lot of work to do, of course, and the city will be working with you. Obviously, Mr. Gould has pointed out some concerns. I believe that those are things that can be worked through. So, thank you
Very much for your time. We are excited to build our home here, and we will continue to work with our neighbors to be great neighbors and really make an asset for University Heights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is item E, ordinance 2021-16, adopting the City of University Heights Employee Policies and Procedures Manual and declaring an emergency. This is on second reading, and Mr. Kennedy, you were going to speak on this point.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I've been working with Mr. McConville. We have, I think, incorporated all the necessary changes into the document, but we need to review those individually with the people that those changes would impact. We have not been able to do that to this point. And in fairness to those folks, I would just ask that give us another 2 weeks to get that accomplished. And the manual, unless Mr. McConville has more changes, I think the manual will then be in a position to be approved by council at the second meeting in June.
Okay, very good. In light of that, we would ask for a motion to table this item to the next meeting.
Mayor, I'll move to table.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Motion table by Mr. Rock, a second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould. Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Next item is item F, Resolution 2021-22, recognizing June 2021 as Pride Month in the city of University Heights. I'm going to go ahead and read this. Whereas the city of University Heights is a diverse community comprised of people from all walks of life and a multitude of backgrounds living together in harmony. And whereas the people who make up the LGBTQIA community, being people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, aromantic, together with their allies, are our friends, family, and neighbors seeking acceptance for who they are within the greater community. And whereas with the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, thus began the modern civil rights movement for LGBTQIA individuals, and this movement has made significant progress in the pursuit of equal rights and protections under the law. And whereas in 2019, the City Council of the City of University Heights adopted a resolution commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. And whereas in 2020, the mayor and all members of City Council jointly sponsored and enacted an ordinance prohibiting discrimination against LGBTQIA individuals in employment and public accommodations, joining Cuyahoga County and other select communities around Ohio, while the state and federal governments continue to fail to offer these same protections against discrimination. And whereas Mayor Michael Dillon Brennan signed a proclamation declaring June 2020 as Pride Month in the city of University Heights, which, among other things, recognized the anticipated imminent passage of the aforementioned legislation. And whereas the city of University Heights raised the Pride flag at City Hall this month, as it has every June since 2019, in commemoration of the 30th anniversary of Stonewall and in celebration of Pride Month. And whereas the month of June is widely recognized as Pride Month in communities throughout our nation. And whereas the arc of the moral universe is long, but nevertheless bends towards justice, and that the virtuous pursuit of justice must be tireless and relentless. And whereas it is the strong desire of the city of University Heights to continue to create a welcoming community for all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, that people in this city feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders, that we continue to lead by example until our state and our country implement the same protections against discrimination that we have in this city. Now, therefore, be it resolved jointly by the Mayor and City Council of the City of University Heights, Ohio, that Section 1, the Council of the City of University Heights hereby declares June 2021 as LGBTQIA Pride Month in the City of University Heights. Section 2, the Clerk of Council is hereby instructed to distribute notice of the passage of this resolution in her usual and customary way. Section 3, it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of the Council concerning and relating to the passage of this resolution were adopted in an open meeting of this Council, and that all deliberation of this council and of any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements. Section 4, this resolution is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the citizens of the city of University Heights. It shall therefore become effective upon its passage by the affirmative vote of not less than 5 members of council and approval of the mayor. Otherwise, it shall become effective at the earliest time allowed by law. Is there a motion?
I'll move, Mayor.
Very good. There's a motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to adopt. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Ertl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our interns, Maeve Kozak and Chase Mandel, for their work on this resolution. Next is item G, ordinance 2021-19, authorizing the transfer of funds from the General Fund 100 to the Capital Improvements Fund 400 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a planned transfer that was part of the permanent budget for 2021. So I want to get this posted before we get to the mid-year so we can take a look and see what, if any, adjustments we would, not only in the capital fund, but other funds. But this was included as a transfer in the budget that was passed by council.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy? And if not, is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Madeline,
Is this an emergency?
Dennis Kennedy,
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Mrs. Blankfeld, will you amend your motion to make that a motion to adopt on emergency?
I will. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. And Mrs. Weiss, do you still second? Okay, very good. Thank you. Good catch, Kelly. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll first on the suspension of the rules?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, I wasn't looking.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
And then on the main motion.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next is item H, Resolution 2021-20, adopting the alternative 2022 tax budget. This is on first reading. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an annual requirement according to state law. The tax budget for 2022 needs to be filed with the county on or before July 15th. I wanted to get it on first reading here so we could get it passed at the second meeting in June and not require a special meeting at the beginning of July. There's no changes to the proposed tax rates that will be applied in 2022. They will be the same as what is in effect this year. This is really the process where the County Budget Commission certifies that there is a need to levy taxes on behalf of the city. Council will get a certification from the county sometime in late August, early September that we will have to approve and then file with the county for the finalization of all the tax rates. We're assuming that the county will certify the rates that we've requested. So this is on first reading. And again, there'll be no changes to the tax rate. I did put a note in there that it's probably worth some discussion in next year's budget process to change the millage rates, since the park bonds will be paid off after 2022. So if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer those now or in 2 weeks.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
In the interest of time, maybe not this evening, but Mr. Kennedy, I appreciate your offer to discuss that. And I think next meeting would be a good time to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. All right. If there is nothing further, then we will consider the first reading on Resolution 2021-20 to have been had. And we will then move on to item Ordinance 2021-21, extending the appointment of Rachel Mullen as Assistant Clerk of Council for the limited purpose of performing duties on behalf of the Civil Service Commission for the period of July 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency. I'll speak to this briefly. I know that our police chief was unable to be here this evening. I know Chief Perko is here. I understand from both chiefs that they've appreciated the attention and care that Ms. Mullen has dedicated to this role. This is something that has assisted in getting the examinations for both potential incoming employees as well as promotionals of existing employees nearly complete at this point, in time that we were all hoping that we would be able to accomplish the kind of time that required, the additional assistance of our clerk, of the clerk of council in order to provide that kind of singular focus to this particular task. The work is not quite done, although the bulk of it is done. It makes more sense for Ms. Mullen to continue the work and to continue the periodic work that comes up with the Civil Service Commission to see through the projects that she's been working on. I do believe that we can rightly call the appointment a success, and we did originally do a 6-month trial appointment. I would recommend that we do another 6 months, and thus we have the ordinance to extend by an additional 6 months this appointment. So I would ask that that be done this evening, that a motion to approve be had and done on emergency so that it can be done effectively, immediately. Thank you.
Mayor
Yes.
Brennan, having been a clerk of council for a good number of years with the city of Beechwood, I ran the civil service processes, both promotional and new hires. I know how much work is involved, and I know the intricacies, and I know how important it is to be timely, so that the city's needs can be met for hiring. I'm really impressed with the work that Ms. Mullen did, because coming into it basically blind and not having that wealth of experience behind her, tremendous job. I also move.
Very good. On emergency, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. So we have a motion to adopt on emergency by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll first on the suspension of the rules?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And then on the main motion.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. And congratulations to Ms. Mullen for another 6 months, and congratulations to us for having her for 6 months. So, and thank you also to Kelly Thomas for her assistance getting Rachel off to a good start 6 months ago. All right, next is item J, motion approving 2021 Street Improvement Program Change Order Number 1 for NES Corporation, Inc., contract in the amount not to exceed an additional contract amount of $30,000. That's a 7.7% increase, bringing the total contract amount not to exceed $416,643. Mr. Cheney, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. The road program resurfacing project has started this year, and after removing the asphalt, we did a thorough examination of the curbs and discovered we did not have enough quantity set up in the bid price for the curbs, especially on Hillbrook. Hillbrook is considered a through street versus a local side street, and we like to have full curbs on that entire stretch. Two other things happened after the bid. We had two major water main breaks, one on Washington near John Carroll there by Elmdale, and one in front of Garrity School on Renford. The street repairs above those water main breaks are too large for our service department, so we asked the road contractor to repair those. We got a price for that. So I'm respectfully requesting change order number 1 for $30,000 to the contract.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? Not, is there a motion?
I just had one question, Mayor.
Mrs. Weiss, go ahead.
I was just wondering, how were the curbs miscalculated? Like, was that an internal miscalculation or a different department?
We normally take just a percentage of the length of the street. Until you get all the asphalt out of there and you expose them, you can't tell. You just have to use your judgment. And we underestimate a little bit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Erdl. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next is item K, motion to accept questions for 2021 rubbish study and proceeding with printing of survey. Councilperson Gould, I believe you should take the floor on this.
Thanks so much, Mayor. I appreciate being recognized. The Service and Utilities Committee has been working for the past several months on creating a survey that would go out to residents as recommended by the solid waste study that was completed by the city. And the survey would gauge residents' views on the proposed change to municipal waste collection services. At a previous session of council, the council approved entering into a contract with Dr. Tom Sutton at Baldwin Wallace and have participated with the administration, and including the mayor and members of council, at two committee meetings since then to present the process that we would go through and then to submit questions to Dr. Sutton for consideration as he designed the survey. We most recently met, I believe it was last week or last week, to go over those questions. Met with Dr. Sutton, submitted proposed revisions, and Dr. Sutton was kind enough to finish that expediently, and that's been submitted to council as part of their packet this evening. Perhaps it would be best if we turned to Mr. McConville now to discuss some concerns that were raised as part of this process that I think should be made part of the record, as well as legal opinions that he has made. All to say that there was an issue that was raised with the potential implications of the Cleveland Heights University Heights audit finding by the state of Ohio that gave some concern that perhaps spending public money on this survey may be implicated by the auditor's decision, and Mr. McConville was asked to give an opinion as to whether or not it was appropriate to proceed with the meeting with Dr. Sutton to finalize the survey, and then also if it would be appropriate to proceed with the survey itself to send out to residents. So if you will allow Mr. Mayor, if Mr. McConville could summarize the need for those his two opinions for the record.
Yes, Mr. McConville, would you proceed, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I think as Mr. Gould alluded to, the concern arose out of an audit finding that was made against the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District in connection with a survey that went out that related to a then proposed levy and some reporting that was done by Cleveland.com in connection with that finding. I've taken a close look at Ohio Revised Code section 9.03 and the annotations that fall under that section, and have reviewed that section in connection with very specific facts that relate to the city's current situation. And in particular, I make a point of walking through what I consider to be important facts in this opinion that include the city's having obtained a report and a solid waste collection study and report from GT Environmental. That included within that report was a specific recommendation by the third party GT Environmental that a survey be conducted of the community on particular issues. 9.03 is a section that presents both permissive expenditures and prohibited expenditures of public funds in connection with political campaigns, issues, and candidates. In particular, that section allows for the publication and distribution of newsletters with the use of public funds. And then critically, the following language, or any other means to communicate information about, and this is also important language, plans, policies, and operations of the political subdivision to members of the public. It's my judgment that the survey in question falls squarely into that particular language of section 9.03, that is a communication using other means, and importantly about plans, policies, and operations, and also importantly not about particular candidates, and not about a levy, not about a political campaign. The opinion that I render is that very simply, the expenditure of funds by the City of University Heights for the development, mailing, and analysis of the solid waste survey is permissible. And I rely on several, again, facts, and I'll walk through those, some of which I've already mentioned. Number one, the solid waste survey relates to an issue or policy of general concern in the city. Number two, the solid waste survey seeks to disclose and gather information about the expenditure of public funds. Number three, the solid waste survey has been contemplated since May 15th of 2020 upon issuance of the GTE report, and was recommended by a third party and discussed and worked on in public for a period of months. Number four, members of council and the mayor have had the opportunity to participate in drafting the proposed solid waste survey. I think this point is directly relevant to the public comment we heard earlier this meeting offered by Ms. Weiser, and making sure that the survey is free from any bias. Number five, that there is no ballot issue or levy or campaign issue pending. Number six, that the outcome of the survey is not known and therefore cannot be seen to favor any one political candidate over another without knowing its results. That's the basic summary. I also note that there's a prohibition in 9.03 that relates to a prohibition against knowingly conducting a direct or indirect transaction of public funds to the benefit of any of the following. It lists a number of categories that include campaign committee, political action committee, legislative, campaign fund, political party, a candidate. And in this case, the money is directly fee for service. It's a fee being paid to the third party vendor to develop a product, the contents of which are not, or the data in connection with which is not yet known. So based on all of that, and with the understanding that an audit finding will now fall squarely on me, having rendered a legal opinion, I'm comfortable that the city can proceed with the survey.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. And previously, in advance of the committee meeting last week, the vice mayor, together with myself, called you and asked, given several items, including the fact that there would be no additional expenditure incurred by the presentation of the questions, and that Mr. Sutton had already completed a certain set of work. You previously advised that the meeting, there was no problem with that meeting going forward. Is that also correct?
That's right. That's accurate. I do want to make one distinction, and I will apologize in advance for the, OCD lawyer appearing, but that's a separate legal issue that we were discussing. And in particular, it's a contract issue where I think one could argue that Mr. Sutton had performed services in reliance on representations that had been made to him, both in the form of council's motion that had been passed on the one hand, and then the participation of council and the mayor in meetings with him during which he was rendering services on the other. Separate legal issue, but again, I think it's material that he was not going to be charging any additional amounts for the services that he was running at that particular meeting.
Thank you. Council will recall that when last the issue of the survey was before council, we approved the design and tabulation expenditures for Mr. Sutton and separately stated that we would return to council with the plan to mail. I have worked with Mr. Cook. We've identified a couple potential options to get this survey out to each household in the city. One is an outside provider that may be slightly less expensive than the printer who we know, use, and work well with. It's my intention to, if the administration is in support of using that individual, that we go with that option. However, I think, Mr. McConville, your opinion came out today. I think that the individual whose head this would fall on, had you not rendered that opinion, would be the mayor and the finance director. I think it's only appropriate that we give them the opportunity to, and all of us the opportunity to review the opinion that you've rendered, raise any questions or concerns that we have with that, and also will give us the opportunity, should we all be in agreement and there are no more clarifications necessary after your opinion was rendered, for us to get that plan together to council by our next meeting. So that will be my plan forward. And with that, I would make a motion that we table this until the next meeting for those reasons.
Very good. We have a motion to table to the next meeting by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld? Mrs. Blankfeld, you're muted.
I apologize. Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Item is tabled to the next meeting. Next is item L, a motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. There are three matters that we need to discuss in executive session. One is a University Square update. Second is a matter regarding pending litigation. The third is a personnel matter. For the University Square update and pending litigation, we'll want Mr. McConville together with Mrs. Drucker and Mr. Engelbrecht with us and the council in the executive session. For the personnel matter, it'll just be myself, council, and Mr. McConville. So Mrs. Drucker and Mr. Engelbrecht will drop off before the third item. Is there a motion?
I'll move, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second by Gould.
Second by Gould. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good. We'll have the executive session at the conclusion of the regular portion of the meeting. We now turn to directors' reports, and we'll start with finance. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I will have financial information for the month of May done hopefully by the end of this week. So I will get all those appropriate reports out to council, hopefully before the weekend. And I think everyone's aware we finished the 2019 audit. We're about 2 weeks away, if not a little under that timeline, to getting the results of the 2020 audit. I'll keep you posted on that as well. And we also completed a 3-year audit of the CIC, and those results will be communicated directly to the board from the Auditor State's office and then be publicly posted probably sometime next week. So no problems that I'm aware of with either of those 3 separate examinations. And I will get the information out to council about financial data through the end of May this week. But until then, any other questions, be happy to answer.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
No question, but a comment. As always, Mr. Kennedy, thank you for the vast amount of work that you do to keep us financially in the right direction and being so very communicative with the data. Always pleased to hear that we are keeping ourselves in a position where we get good audits. That's not something extraordinary that should be expected. So always appreciate all the efforts you put in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Steinfeld.
Okay, any further questions?
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Ertl.
if I could interrupt, I need to excuse myself from the rest of the meeting, if that's all right.
Understood. I hope all is well, Mr. Ertl. Have a good evening.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. Anything further from Mr. Kennedy? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We move now to Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I will deliver my report to council in executive session.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Public Safety, Police. I believe Chief Rogers has joined us. Chief.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. No report tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. 2 items to report this evening. First being that we have completed our springtime hydrant flushing and flowing program. We'll be coming out with a report. We flushed all the hydrants in the city, and then we flow tested half of them. When we do flushing in the fall, we will flow test the second half. Second item, we've been talking about the home safety inspection program for a few years now. That went through Safety Committee in 2019. It was in the January newsletter back in 2020, pre-COVID, and then we were forced to delay the program. We did have it in the summer mosaic, and we were ready to start kicking this program off now. Since the mosaic went out and we started promoting it this year with things starting to normalize, we've done 22 home safety inspections to date, and we'll be targeting districts in the community to promote it and make sure that we ensure that we get the most coverage across the entire city over the scope of the 5-year project. So if anyone has interest or neighbors that are looking to have a free home safety inspection, tell them to call the fire department and we will get them scheduled. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Any questions for Chief Perko? All right. Moving along, service, Mr. Picorni.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Only one item to report. The Purvis Pool has now opened, so we are doing open swim sessions this week, and programs will start next week. And that's my report for the evening.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? All right, seeing none, we will move on to building. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Other than the building department is now open to the public that you have already reported, nothing else to report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. White. Any questions for Mr. White? All right. Moving along then to housing and community development, Mr. Engelbrecht.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Our department completed 2 business occupancy applications during the month of May. This is all for the month of May. 15 certificate of compliances, 16 certificate of transfers, 21 contractor registrations, which were processed. Again?
I'm sorry, they're muted. Go ahead, Mr. Engelbrecht.
Okay. Yeah, 21 contractor registrations, which were processed. We returned 336 emails, set up 5 escrow requests, had 441 incoming calls to the department, 34 point of sale applications, which were processed, 2 point of sale reports. Rental permit applications were 3. We had 35 special garbage pickups processed and 71 lawns, which were sent over to be cut by the service department. We also worked with the police department on having search warrants executed on 4 properties. The first being 2215 Brockway, the second being 3621 East Scarborough, the third being 3485 Tullamore, and the fourth being 3673 Washington. I forwarded photos of the interior inspections this morning to all the council people. 3 of the properties at 2215 Brockway, 3485 Tullamore, and 3673 Washington. After the interior inspections, those will result in new violation notices and or criminal complaints to be sent over to the court. The property at 3621 East Scarborough is in current tax foreclosure and is 49,000 behind in taxes. I spoke with Kim Steigerwald of the Cuyahoga County Land Bank about when the property would go to sheriff's sale. Her estimation was that it would be next year, beginning of next year, for that particular property. We've been proactive on attacking or addressing some of the vacant and abandoned properties in the city. We will be sending out 17 new violation notices to properties located at 3490 Raymont, 3621 Raymont, 3777 Bushnell, 3518 Washington, 2188 Brockway, 2204 Brockway, 2215 Brockway, 3633 Cedarbrook, 3822 Cedarbrook, 3708 Meadowbrook, 3641 Northcliffe, 3565 Silsby, 3590 Silsby, 3485 Tullamore, and 3673 Washington, along with 4037 Washington. In addition, our department updated the community with a pre-construction meeting recently for the property to be built at 3509 Raymont. The meeting was on May 21st. And lastly, again, this department will be aggressively pushing cases forward involving vacant and abandoned properties to the court. I have nothing further.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Moving right along, we have City Engineer Joe Cheney. Mr. Cheney.
Mayor, no report this evening. No report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Communications and Civic Engagement, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'll keep this very quick. Our June newsletter is coming out at the end of the month, and that's being done on purpose so we can remind people of the 4th of July parade and inform them of the route, which is the traditional route that we've used for Memorial Day. So 3rd or 4th week of June, the June newsletter will come out. And like I said, there's a method to the madness of it hitting late. Speaking of the 4th of July parade, moving the parade as we were forced to due to COVID, it creates challenges, but also creates opportunities. I want to give you a sneak peek. I've been working with Rachel on this. Rachel did the heavy lifting, but we kind of came up with the idea together that if you're going to have an Independence Day parade, if you could have anyone in the parade, living or dead, on a short list, we'd have George Washington. So we will have a professional George Washington impersonator riding in the parade. So give it kind of transition to a 4th of July theme, and I think there's going to be more fun where that came from. So big event, 11 o'clock on 4th of July.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any questions for Mr. Cook? All right. Economic Development, Mrs. Drucker.
Good evening, Council. Just to give you an update that for the Comprehensive Zoning Code update, we have started our interview process for the consulting firms that did bid on, or the firms, I should say, that bid on that. And so we are hopefully getting back. We will come with back to Council with a recommendation for approval, hopefully before you enter into your recess for the summer. And the rest of my report I will have in executive session as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Any questions for Mrs. Drucker? Seeing none, we now turn to reports from standing committees, Building and Housing, Mrs. Blankfeld.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankenfeld. Community outreach, Mrs. Pardee. Is Mrs. Pardee still with us?
She had to leave the meeting, Mayor.
You had to leave? Okay, understood. Thank you. Economic development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor. Sorry, I switched to the iPhone. My computer froze. I'm still trying to get it up. We had, as Ms. Drucker explained, the zoning code comprehensive update. We did 2 interviews. As the chairperson of the committee, I attended those interviews with the administration, and we'll bring an update as soon as possible, but no other report beyond that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Finance, Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. We will be having a finance committee meeting in the next week or two to discuss some of the vacant homes that the housing director just spoke about.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Ertl had to leave. Anybody from the committee have a report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to safety. Mrs. Berry.
No report.
No report. Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Service and utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you. Nothing further to report.
Okay, thank you. And committee of the whole, Mrs. Weiss.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, no report. We are now at the conclusion of the regular portion of the meeting. There is an executive session that we need to hold that will include council members, the mayor, the law director, the economic development director, and the housing and community development director. I do not anticipate any business after the executive session beyond a motion to adjourn. You are welcome to stay outside here in the Zoom meeting. I don't think you'll be missing much. Of course, this is on YouTube, so if there is something later that you do want to see or that there is to see, you are welcome to come back and take a look. Our next regular meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight on the 21st of June. So without further ado, we will set up the executive session. Thank you, all of you from the public who are here. And if you are here on the other side, we'll see you then. If not, have a good rest of your night. Let's see. Kelly, I thought I had co-hosting, but I don't see where I can set up the breakout room. Could you just make me the host? There it is, breakout rooms. Okay, one moment. I think I have everybody. Okay. All right, I'm going to open the room. Oh, I didn't add Luke. One moment. Oh, no, it looks like I did. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. They're still in executive session.
No. It's over.
No, there is still an executive session.
Is there a motion to return to regular session?
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Rock, second by Mr. Gould. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Have a good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Be well.